Hey everyone, this is Uncle Four Eyes, and I've got something a little different than just showing off comics, but a little tutorial how to add. This is just gonna show you like how you could just basically just do those basic camera shots that you would see in a film, the extreme wide shots, the wide shots, the medium close up, the extreme close ups, those things. But how would you depict those in like a comic book or something that you yourself are going to have to render? Like with basic photography, cinematography, all you're doing is basically just zooming in or getting physically closer to your person, your actor in question. But in art, you can't just simply do that unless it's a 3D model and you're using a virtual camera to then zoom in and out of that model. In art, you tend to have to use your mind in a way to illustrate when an item is closer to you or further away from you, and I don't, just whatever in question. So I'm going to use my character, Pog Head Yo, or just Yo, and I'm going to use him as an example just because it's just going to be simple just to do little square heads and stuff like that. And it also kind of just reiterates or kind of reinforces design. So we'll do things like close-ups, middles, and far. And I'm just going to do these really quick, just in camera. I don't have anything planned, so I'm just gonna do something like a close-up. So I'm gonna use obviously potentially different panels. Like you could potentially use different panels when you're making comics, and just for the sake of simplicity, we'll just use whatever square. I want to do an extreme close-up. Now you could just do the face like that, right? And at this point, that almost kind of looks like the head of Poghead Yo already. Or if you want to, or I would suggest, not going with potentially you could do like parallels with the frame. You could black it out. You could almost do like a letterbox effect and have him, be like, like he's really mad or whatever, right? And so you have a real far close in, this is where his eyes are obviously going to be the main focus, his mouth. You really only need eyes and mouth really to show any expression. Obviously, the brow of the eyes as well technically is in there as well. Now, that's an extreme close-up. Now, of course, I'm using also this big thick pencil, so I'm not worried about, going in and, if I was going to do it again, I'm not going to just do this and then be like, and try and add too many things. And of course, also, as you make this panel smaller, you're only going to be able to draw so much. So I would never worry about doing anything too crazy. I'm using this primarily for the sake of it being there's no emphasis on line art or details necessarily. It's all about just being able to read it. Like obviously someone might say this is messier than that, and they're probably right. But essentially you want, so obviously if I was going to make a bigger picture, or a frame, so like say like it goes from here to here for whatever reason, you have a slightly kind of mad to like absolutely, obviously I'm also emphasizing it with the type of angry line, aggressive lines. You make the frame crazy. Obviously, I could always get into the weeds about that. And so as it progresses or whatever, there you go. But again, look how simplistic that is. I mean, there's his eyes, there's his brow. Maybe use the under lip lids to show that he's squinting instead of him being his eyes are open. and then his mouth, gritting his teeth. That you can do just in the box. That's the extreme close-up. Or you could do this. Again, I'm going to just do like this size. I want to do like a Dutch angle, kind of whatever you want to call it, slant. So you want to do that. And then right here, you're going to go like, ooh, fix that. And he's going to be more like, whoa. So maybe put some, now he looks like a cat. Maybe make, whoa, he's reacting to something. Close up, extreme reaction. Again, I want this simple, and when you go to ink it, you pretty much just do it straight up that way. I wouldn't do too much different inking. I might it's going to be tightened up a little bit. So that's like the close up, I would imagine. You're doing, I would always work at a close up. Again, going back to like close up is this right here. You want this to be, you're going to want to express as much detail in something like this, and you could really get into the minutia of this. This is when it's okay, because you're close up. If he's just doing, I don't know, a Ninja Turtle thing, you can then really get into the minutia and like all the wrinkles and all the details and whatever he's got going on here, right? Maybe he's got a little bit of hairs on his lip. I forget the guy's name who did all the extreme close-ups for the Ren and Stimpy show, but you're essentially doing doing that where you're really making like, putting all the little zits and pimples and really rendering it out, and then of course when you ink it, you just go crazy. That's an extreme close-up. You would render the hell out of it, because that is what is going to be the most clear. That's obviously what you're focusing on. Now let me get a new piece of paper. We'll do a middle shot, a medium shot, whatever you want to call it. Again, let's go with something this big. Now, we'll just, again, I might mix up certain terminology, but essentially I'm trying to tell you how, like, when I start doing something like this, now his head's involved. Before here, his face was only mostly involved, not his head, not his skull, not his neck. Your character's not going to be seen more than just, this. Maybe you get it's more like a bust or something, Maybe you get a hand, You're going to still want to render only so much, and you can only add so many elements into the picture at roughly a medium shot. Right here, I'm going to be able to actually, define his body a little bit more. Again, I'm using this to kind of show you how, like, it can really be simplified this way. Like, you can have an art, like a really meticulous, over the top, just heavily defined pencils and ink, art style. But in a lot of times, it comes from like that, less is more sometimes, or trying not to overwhelm the viewer. So with me, I like to find that there's a nice middle ground where you get what's going on. You see, he's waving at you essentially. Let's just put let's put some wave marks or something here, right? He's waving, and let's say he's happy. So we're gonna put his face obviously in a chipper mood. Again, he's maybe he's a little cheeky, being a little slightly cheeky with his kind of devilish grin or whatever. Again, this character works really well for just drawing on the spot, because he's really just this vague rectangle head character. Again, you're only going to be able to draw so much, but once you also have to add more elements. So now you have to consider, what does a hand look like? Is the hand super rendered out. All the cracks and all the lines and wrinkles and every little bony, is every little, you obviously seen that. Everyone's seen a hand, obviously. Look at yours right now. All the little things, and again, see my hand. Look at all those, like, this is a terrible hand, but like, look how much I'm trying to like oversell, this, hand when, you do the whole stick figure silhouette kind of thing. And this is a terrible hand, but it still technically does the same effect, right? You're rendering it less, but it's still giving you the proper information. And we'll get back to this kind of thing in a second. But yeah, middle shot, you don't want to have to worry about too much. Going back to this, you're not going to render out all his pimples and all his zits and all the wrinkles in his face. Some of these lines, might be thicker. You might be allowed to create with thicker, bolder lines. Here, you could do bold lines still too, but then you would have even less detail if you're doing bold lines, because you would have something along the lines of like, if we're doing something bold, I'm only going to be able to do so much with a bold pen, and I'm not very good with brush pens. But like I'm already struggling to like keep it there, when if you have something with a thinner line, you can actually get in here and actually draw things, but you don't also want to fixate over too many specific things. So like really that is going to be as far as you can get, and essentially you're going further away. Again, this is potentially could be, this is the first shot and then it goes to this, right? Close up. Or this goes from here and then it goes out and he's just kidding. He's like, just kidding. I wasn't mad. So when you zoom out or zoom in, the details in a drawing have to be then depicted as such. And it's not just a matter of, and of course you could do this in the digital age now as well, I would imagine too, is, say you take your program and you draw a character and then you just use like the resize tool and just shrink and stretch and whatever and do all that, and that technically works. But just like when you go up and down in your resolution, you can start to get like pixely, corrupted looking, kind of vomity looking resolution, visuals. So you would have to either redraw it or make sure you're upscaling it or whatever properly to where you keep the clarity. So anyways, going on to this, you have, let's do also now, we'll do like the extreme wide shot. And now we'll have essentially the same character again. I'm just doing the same character, but now, and this is going to be obviously like I would consider extreme or fairly wide shot, where, and of course this is kind of boring because he's right in the middle of the shot when he should probably be closer over here, ideally for your composition, you don't want your character to be in the middle typically, unless you're doing some type of like intentional middle kind of what do you call that, like there's a reason for it to be kind of like that, like pose for a shot kind of a thing, instead of being like sequential art or something. Now you probably could tell that I'm just sketching out basically a silhouette, right? Of course I could do I could probably do something that's in between these two, right? Where there's still technically a face in here, but I'm still gonna like start to like really just, I'm not even gonna bother trying to like depict anything here. So what I'll just do is, he's just standing here. Let me grab my eraser real quick just so that this doesn't get too distracting. he's far away from enough to that. Now, this obviously is a stylistic choice I just made, where I decided to black him out. But really, I mean, I could draw little designs here and there, and really render out, make his shirt really, oh, I'm gonna do this, and his shirt is all ripply and whatever, and then his neck, and then his head. And he's gonna, that technically works, right? You could technically do that. See how there's really not much room for details. I mean, you can still technically do that, and it's still considered less detailed than this. But I'm even doing just a silhouette. And then, of course, you can then also do this where, there's background. So now, I don't know, whatever I'm doing here. Now you're clearly also establishing, again, how far back you're pushing something. So in this case, this guy's clearly further back than he was here. Maybe there might have been a slight indication of something in the background, right? And then, of course, in here you can't do anything but just do the face. But just doing the silhouette, again, the character just being blacked out is all, maybe he is saying goodbye. Maybe he's waving, I don't know, wave marks or something. I don't know, whatever, right? That's obviously going to be all you need to really show. You don't really need to go into great detail on that. So whenever you're picking your shots, always remember to, again, it's not about just, oh, I'm just going to take this and blow it up, and then I'm going to trace that, or, I'm not just going to do this, whoop, close, mid, far, which technically you can. But I think that you're typically looking at the picture as a whole with more clarity, or with more of a compositional intent than just if you were just to go boop, 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 like that. That I think shows a better display of storytelling, and also it's technically not shorthand. Because technically, this is obviously me drawing 3 different pictures, right? I'm not just taking one picture and just repeating it and then just playing with the zoom in and out, which you could technically, again, do if you're short on time or something, or if that's what you want. You want, like, say the whole page is going to be, 6 shots of the exact same thing of the character, slowly going from close up to extreme, wide shot or whatever, or vice versa, zooming in and out or whatever, right? And that's just like the aesthetic of the whole page is supposed to just be kind of that gradual, just do, 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 do. But again, some of those details tend to not really, they don't really tend to hold up. This will always be more likely what your extreme wide shot's going to be. This little guy right here. You ain't going to have too much to work with there. It also helps with scale, of course. So when you do have something big or whatever, you really see how big something is. But yeah, in summary, you're always going to want to, like, essentially create something that is clearly defined for a close-up. Not just something that can be universally like, oh, I can just interchange this with whatever. Again, it's not about having your subject here, and then here and here, for the sake of just, like anything where they are in the subjects in the surrounding area. You have this, 3-dimensional thing. You have to essentially take that same concept of it being 3-dimensional still, and so I was still trying to think of, like, these aren't technically one for one, like, oh, I could tell this guy is the same guy that this is, and then the same guy that's this. But I would much rather articulate what this is supposed to be portraying in a close-up, in a middle shot, and then in a far, wide shot, then again, and these three will be, again, far more specific to the shot as a whole. Again, there's many other things to go, variables and whatnot to go through. But at the end of the day, I think you should always try and imagine the characters and how they like, again, how you would essentially turn a high resolution, Mario. I'm not going to do a good Mario because I can't draw Mario to save my life. How is he going to look, with, this look, with when he's shrunk down to a smaller character, but when he grows, he gets bigger. There's more stuff to him. His limbs and everything get bigger, and there's just more to him. And then when he shrinks back down, he's going back to a smaller kind of, minimalized size. You essentially are kind of doing a similar thing, but in the shot. So this is clearly a less rendered, more subtle, simplistic Poghead Yo than this one is, and then this one's more simplistic than this one. And of course they're going to treat the shots, also treat in the mood of the shot or whatever too, right? This is going to have a very specific reason for why you're doing this versus this versus this. But this Poghead Yo here is not going to just be, I'm not going to try and draw his face exactly like this to the same amount of realisticness or detail, or based on, because it's just not possible. You just, again, I could always go back in here and go, okay, well, I'm just going to draw some eyes, draw some mouth. I don't even know if I want to put a face on him, potentially, because I think it's far more impactful to have him just be a silhouette. And you can clearly, this symbolizes how far away he is to the viewer. And it's going to be more entertaining to see if you were to go from here to here and have the fact that you drew these differently, instead of just photocopying something and then just playing with that. I don't believe that, I think you should do the work to obviously make these three distinctive shots, have also distinctive characteristics or detail. So you're always going to want more detail, most likely here. You can have more detail here technically as well, just not with the character. Maybe the background now also all of a sudden has more detail, and then he's become reduced to just a silhouette. And this one could be a marriage of both, a little bit of the background, a little bit of detail on him. But yeah, you're always going to want to essentially, with any character, and before we end, I have one other one of an example, right? Spider-Man. The only reason why I'm bringing up Spider-Man is when you do a close-up of Spider-Man's face, right? He has all these webs. You see it very plain and obvious. This is I call it the Spider-Man effect, even though it's nothing clever. Just it's the first thing I can think of, right? So I'm not too worried about how well this is drawn at the moment. This side profile, let's just say, of a fairly close-up version of Spider-Man's mask is going to have far more webbing that can be articulated and done without it being too over the top, just gaudy, right? It just doesn't look. It looks good at this level. Now, I'm sure and this is also why I'm using this example, because you can then go and look at this. Some artists and some shots of those said artists, they omit the webbing on Spidey. And I'm sure, again, you know what I mean, or all of a sudden you have a feeling what I'm talking about. When Spidey's doing something gymnastic-like, right, and it's far away, right, and this is a terrible example of Spider-Man doing his little webby thing. You're not going to be able to put the same amount of rendering for his webbing on such a small thing. It just won't work. It has never worked, and it will never work because again, there's just too much detail in something this small that it just won't. You won't be able to get all the little lines. He will be basically where the red is. It's going to be completely just empty, but it'll still be red. The blue will still be blue. So instead of again going, let's do again, big Spider-Man. He's going to have meticulous again, real big, spider webs. And also say I'm going to draw some real bad anatomy for a second. But say he's coming at an enemy and you need to draw multiple shots of Spidey, right? So he I don't know, he's spraying some webbing here. Then he's going to land. And then he's going to lunge out, and let's just say I drew that, right? And it's all in one shot. Drawing Spidey 3 times in this small of detail, you will not be able to get the webbing right. You might be able to get some, there might be a little bit of indication or whatever. But I suggest you look at a Spider-Man comic, and depending on who does it, because they all do it a little bit different, or some don't even try this at all, they will omit the webbing. That's why I call it the Spider-Man thing, the Spider-Man effect, where the further away Spider-Man is, the less likely he'll be able to see his webbing in the art, in drawing. Again, in video games, in movies, he'll always have it because it's always on that person's costume. But when you're drawing, sometimes you're just going to want to just get rid of Spider-Man's webbing. And sometimes I love Spider-Man. I hate his webbing. It's probably the bane of my existence. There's a lot of great superhero designs that I feel like are always stuck with like one thing that just kind of makes it so that like only at certain angles, certain shots, certain close-ups or whatever, those iconic designs like the webbing look great, look beautiful, look iconic. Other times you're just like, why did they choose that when I need to make a 32-page book with all these variations of Spider-Man, and that damn webbing is always going to come back to haunt me on where is it, how is it going to look, so on. And again, some characters don't have the webbing, so they get the bonus of that. And not everyone wants to draw so painstakingly, or can't afford. I mean, sometimes it's a very it's a business that involves getting your bottom line done. Just get it out the door. So I've been Four Eyes, and I hope this helps. Again, shout out to down in the comments about my terrible class for today, and thanks for all the subscribers, all the views on my last videos. I'm just trying my hardest to make something worth your time watching, and I'll see you next time.